All of us are shaped by the hand of one creator, and there's a way in which the gifts that have allowed there to be vaccines are no more than the byproduct of the gifts that have been given to all of us as children of God.
Even a marginally effective HIV vaccine would prevent millions of new HIV transmissions, which would save millions of lives. Therefore, for me, the active pursuit of an effective HIV vaccine that can bring wellness and wholeness to the world is not just theoretical, but it's theological as well. I am Dr. Ulysses Burley, founder of You Be the Cure LLC, which is a Chicago-based organization that operates at the intersection of faith, health, and human rights.
So I'm Edwin C. Sanders II. I'm the senior servant at Metropolitan Interdenominational Church here in Nashville, Tennessee.
I was caring for people living with HIV. For me, I quickly realized that no matter what I did for people in a hospital setting, I would always have to send them back out into a world that made them sick. And that a huge component of those social ills were rooted in faith.
So there's always been, this intersection on one level or another.
I feel like faith, religion, and spirituality has a responsibility to eradicate stigma as it relates to HIV and AIDS, because faith has played such a significant role in stigmatizing HIV and AIDS.
We wanted to make sure that the myths and that the misrepresentations of the truth that were being projected that just had no foundation and had no grounding in the sciences. One of the things that has always been important for me in working with the Vaccine Trial Network and at the same time working with faith communities is getting people to understand where that intersection is.
So it only makes sense that the faith community is an active partner in any endeavor to heal the masses, and that faith and science are, again, partners that God gave us science so that we can solve these complex issues that we're faced with here on earth, and that our scientific endeavors, our medical endeavors should not be void of that faith. One of the things I think the HVTN does really well is invest in priority populations and communities before we have an ask, because we understand that trust comes from relationships, and relationships come from intentional investments into those communities.
Because we know that in our communities, where people go first very often is to their pastor and to their faith leaders. It's very true in many other religions as well.
So it's why our faith initiative is as diverse as it is. It's why our faith initiative resembles closely the HIV epidemic as it exists in the United States. It's why we don't have just Christian representatives, but Muslim representatives, people of the Baha'i faith, people of the Buddhist faith, because we recognize that, the world is not a monolith.
We have had efforts to make sure we bring more and more young people into the pipeline that will translate into us having PIs in our research sites that look like people who are being most disproportionately impacted. And the fact is, that's been one of our toughest nuts to crack. We also wanted to make sure that the people who are our most consistent voices of information dissemination within our communities, that those persons had accurate information, that they could speak responsibly and articulately.
It's really meeting people where they are, as long as where they are isn't a place of hurt or harm or hate, and providing exposure for them to learn more about experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Over time, one of the things that has happened as a result of building rapport, establishing relationships, and allowing there to be avenues for insight into the ways in which research was transpiring.
History and research says that when Black and brown people get the information that they need to make an informed decision, that they are more likely then to participate in research and science than any other population. We just need those fears addressed before we move forward.
There came to be a greater level of acceptance. And for that reason, we did have pretty quickly a very significant number and a reasonable number of African Americans and other people of color who were willing to participate in the trials. But we were trying to make sure we got those numbers up.
And so we lead in that way with hopes that when the time comes for when we do have clinical trials, when we do need community participation and input, that people will be able to say, this is an institution that has done things differently. This is an institution that has communicated with me from the very beginning. This is an institution that invested in my community when they didn't need anything from us. And they had trusted messengers who looked like me, who shared my experiences, who validated my concerns and my skepticism. And as a result of that, I feel now encouraged and even empowered to participate in the science so that I can be a part of the solutions to the problems that disproportionately impact my people.
One word that repeatedly comes to mind and comes up is the word trust. Everybody is looking at our community and saying that we don't trust the voices of those who represent the leadership and those who are doing the research and the like.
A part of my work is to acknowledge the elephant in the room, to affirm people's skepticism, to say you are not wrong for having questions about the science. You're not wrong for having questions about the medicine, given the history of science and medicine in this particular group of people.
The issue is that we do trust. We do trust that there's always been a discrepancy in the way in which our needs have been responded to.
So before we can even talk to people about an eventual HIV vaccine, we have to address the real mistrust that exists and validate that mistrust. I think the worst thing that we can do is dismiss people's skepticism because it dismisses their very real history.
What I'm saying to you is most difficult for me was very often being the voice that was willing to defend. Many of those who were being questioned in terms of, can you really effectively develop this vaccine, do this research, and implement the benefits that will come from it?
So we always make sure that we affirm people's concerns, and then we give them the facts as to why our processes for approaching research and development are and will be different than the processes that have historically disenfranchised Black and Brown people, making sure that communities are involved in the research and development process from the very beginning and continue to be involved every step of the way.
So I would say that that word trust is an important one. But I would say the word, for me, that supersedes all of that is the word love. It's important to weave the word love into anything you're trying to advance amongst people of faith.
We believe that we're equipped to be able to handle all of that diversity, to come to a common place of love, affirmation, inclusion, through storytelling, which is a really important component of our work. Science and data usually is a tool of information. We believe that storytelling is a tool of transformation. So it's why I really lean into the work at this intersection of faith and HIV. I believe that they can be important partners and that we won't end the HIV epidemic without the activity of affirming inclusive faith communities.